Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and hello and welcome back. Now, kind of the reason I wanted to do like a video format in this way as opposed to just making a community post is because there are several things I wanted to personally thank in each and every one of you for. So let's do it. Let's let the good times roll, eh? So, first of all, I think we were on something about like 1750 subscribers exactly a month ago, and we've leaped to over 2,000 subscribers in less than 30 days. And let me tell you something right now, ladies and gentlemen. I've been doing YouTube for 5 years right now, and I've never, ever had that level of growth in such a short amount of time. Not even from when I was like on 50 subscribers at one point for this channel, and it literally leapt to 1,000 in 6 weeks. So I want to give you guys a massive round of applause for subscribing to me and to highlighting and we'll get to that in a second, don't worry. And the second thing I kind of wanted to thank you guys for is because of what happened last night, is that for the very first time since I started doing YouTube, because they have a thing on the analytics part of your channel where they say how many views you got in 48 hours. And last night, for the very first time, I got over 100,000 views. And let me tell you something, that has never ever happened before. And I feel like that's just worth like another round of applause right there, because I honestly, I couldn't quite believe it. So, for those who are just joining us, maybe I should give you guys a little bit of an introduction as to just sort of what this channel is about and why I've taken the time to do this. Is because we are living in very difficult times, ladies and gentlemen. We are living in an age where so much of like policies, decision making, rules, and everything else is decided by a very select number of people who try to convince us that they know what they're doing and that their ideologies and their ideas are not to be mistaken with other less agreeable persons. I won't necessarily say which ones because you could probably work it out for yourselves, but again, there are certain repercussions that could be fought upon for saying such things that you probably know what they are and I know what they are. And here's like something really, really important I want to emphasize is that despite what my opinions are of this government, and they may be the same as your opinions, they may not, they may differ slightly, we might be on completely polar ends of the spectrum when it comes to certain levels of decision-making, attitudes, all sorts of things and stuff like that. But the point is that if you want to be like them, then be like them. Whatever is good for the goose is good for the gander, as they say. However, if you are very anti-government, or maybe you're anti this government, or it could be anti the next government, or whatever the case might be, then the thing to do is not be like them. And I've always kind of like adopted the policy of they may act this way, and the attitude of our times may coerce some people to act in a certain way and to do certain things. But that does not mean for any one instance that I have to fall into that. If I want to be myself, then I will happily be myself. And I think that's absolutely fine. Sometimes we literally will just let people get on with it. With that being said, however, there is a very interesting thing that I've developed, and you probably heard me say this over the last 2 years, but I'm just going to say it again, is that the attitude of our times, and even the newspapers are starting to catch on to it because of what was written in the papers today. The Daily Mail, for example, they were talking about how Starmer wants to simply open the floodgates for more asylum-seeking migrants. And again, it's these sorts of things you begin to notice or pick upon the things about how the language of certain papers do change about this, because the Daily Mail decided to put that as their headline while also putting in small print underneath about how Sir Keir Starmer was going to vote against, smash criminal gangs, like human trafficking and stuff like that. And which is actually something that they put as like bold as brass on the front of the Times as well, because the Times is like, I think, mostly usually in the pockets of well, I know the Express, the Daily Telegraph, and the Daily Mail are, but the Times is kind of a little bit more liberal, I want to say. Not necessarily less right-wing or something like that, but they do, I think, because I wonder if they've caught on, is that support, there's got to be something, honestly, about how some people see the government on both sides of the spectrum, and even some people on opposite viewpoints will say, when you actually look at the bigger picture, it's easy to say it's not working, and there are some very serious issues with the way things are nowadays. For example, Wilko going bankrupt, and Poundland had to resurge them and save 71 stores, or something about like that, I think. Or how even Superdrug, they're sort of concerned about falling into administration, but who's going to bail them out? A lot of people have been complaining ever since the middle of 2020 about how high streets or pubs were even going to survive throughout the pandemic. Quite a lot of pubs and restaurants have survived, not all of them though, and the high street is also being heavily bombarded. Maybe just because of the result of the rise of like inflation and the rise of people doing delivery service. It almost abdicates the idea that you don't even need to leave the house because of certain other factors. Like the Daily Mirror, for example, for the last number of days has been running stories about the year of the shoplifter, and how some people who are almost completely moralless will simply just shoplift, be abusive towards members of staff, and will just leave as though whatever they've just stolen is their God-given right. But I don't particularly think that's right at all. Absolutely not. You may of course have heard the old chestnut about, would you steal a loaf of bread to save your starving family? Well, I would much, again, if I would much rather be in the boat of, I can still feed my family, but that does not mean I have to start resorting to crime. There's plenty on that. And I bring all of this up because the attitude to some people might be not to be pro-Labour, but to be anti-Tory. But now I'm starting to think that even that tide of thought is starting to roll back a little. And how people are starting to realise, or there's an ever-growing voice that we just need Rishi Sunak's government out, because people think it's fundamentally and institutionally corrupt. People also seem to be jumping on the bandwagon, and I'm partially one of those myself, is the fact that I don't think Liz Truss's 40-odd days of absolute anarchy was in any way the Conservatives playing a double game. Because think about it like this. Because we know the economy is absolutely bust, the concept of triple pension being locked and inflate, everything is like spiraling out of control, including the thing about the RAC concrete has been carefully shelved for the time being, because there doesn't seem to be any like resolution, apart from the fact that apparently the Tories were told 5 years ago, back when even Johnson was still Prime Minister, and no, hang on, no, it was Theresa May who was still Prime Minister at that time. But then again, if Johnson wanted to make a case for himself, he could have seen to it as well. You know what I mean? It's just the point I want to make about this, again, through the things about that escaped prisoner and people again complaining about, the boats and stuff like that. And then the Daily what was this stupid thing that the Daily Express were throwing shades at French? And I explained all this before in a community post about how the Express were throwing shades at French police, even though The pictures showed that they were off duty. There's no inclination that the bar they were in was anywhere near Calais. Also, just it's like we just it's again this tactic that I've developed. It's called look over there, in which if you forcibly tell people that actually it's not our fault, it's their fault, because apparently 7 people were enjoying a drink, not even drunk, on a night out, probably when they were off duty. I'm sorry, guys, but this bullshit is not right. It's not how things should be done. It's got to be somebody's responsibility. And responsibility is something I feel like this country has simply not had since, not so much immediately after the Brexit referendum, because I actually watched a bit of that 3-part documentary by Laura Kuenssberg about... it was immediately when the results came in and the UK had voted to leave the EU. I voted Remain. Don't look at me. That was not my fault. And they had Nigel Farage say that you look towards the direction of Boris Johnson and he did not look like a sincere Brexiteer whatsoever. And listen, I've just about disagreed with every single thing Nigel Farage has ever said ever since I caught whiff of him back in 2012. But that might be the very first thing I've actually ever agreed on Nigel Farage from. Because Boris Johnson being sincere... No, those are 2 words that just don't go together. It's you can't... Boris Johnson might be the most insincere politician of all time, because just look at him. I mean, look at him. If you can tell me there's anything sincere in Boris Johnson, please let me know. And I probably will ask you again anyway, because I might still not get it. You know what I mean? And... oh God, you know, again, him working for the Daily Mail, it sort of doesn't surprise me that the Daily Mail, who are a bunch of tax dodgers, would also hire somebody who likes to dodge the law, or even how the Daily Telegraph is now employing Nidihan Sahari, somebody who had to resign in disgrace because he dodged so much tax. It's taxing for the taxpayer, ladies and gentlemen. I've probably paid more tax than the Daily Mail ever have. And I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen, but that doesn't seem particularly very fair if you ask me. Think about it as well, ladies and gentlemen. Think about probably if you've paid any sort of tax. Consider the thought that maybe if it was even so much as, let's say, £250 a month or something like that in tax, you've probably paid more in tax than the Daily Mail might have ever done, ever since they first came into publication, or the first time they ever looked towards Adolf Hitler and said, you know what, he might not actually be as bad as we're making out. Hell, if the Times say he's like Man of the Year, then he's got to be doing something right. That just highlights how ridiculous, just how some people can... And again, I just want to point out is that in the struggle that we face, it's obvious that our leadership they've never truly understood 2 very basic facts about life: accountability and responsibility. Because politicians, bosses, they're not just responsible for their employees, they're responsible for the whole thing. And what I seem to see so much is the fact that accountability and responsibility are just words to these people. It doesn't actually mean anything, and people will continue to sing their praises anyway, when obviously there's nothing... Remember that thing when Rishi Sunak wanted, kids to stay on to study maths at 18? And let me tell you something now, ladies and gentlemen. My dad worked in education for 40 years. He said very simply, how can Rishi Sunak start talking about education if he's never actually worked in a school before? That was just insane, ridiculous, and it was just the sort of thing that spirals in the echo chambers of people like Nadine Dorries or Suella Braverman. And then again, the whole thing about the barge and Rwanda. And again, I don't really know what the right answer is for things like that, apart from, and I'll say it again, from when I very first heard the idea of Rwanda back in 2022, back in February, is that there was a very nasty, out of sight, out of mind ideology to all of it. So that's kind of a little bit what this channel has sort of been about, is that I kind of want to highlight, to expose, to showcase just what sort of mess we really are in. And if there is a solution, it is not to be like them, to prove that there is a better way out of all this. From an economic standpoint, it might be relatively difficult because it would probably, because that's the other huge thing, and the thing that maybe I hadn't thought about fully in detail before saying it, but let's just assume for one moment that Sir Keir Starmer gets into number 10, or it might be Angela Rayner or Rachel Reeves for all I know. There might be a coup d'etat or something like that in Labour, or something like that. I don't know. Maybe Labour will be, maybe they'll do something insane like have Lee Anderson come back. No. If Lee Anderson ever came back to Labour, I would literally quit Labour for the third time and literally never go back. I'd rather take up my position with the Green Party than or with the Socialists than do something like that. But yeah, let's assume that has. But what sort of state is the economy going to be in by then? What sort of state are hospitals, railway networks, hospitals, schools, public funded places like libraries or leisure centres, or playgrounds or fields or farms or any, what sort, or the banks, what sort of country are the Conservatives going to leave behind if Labour ever get in? Or the Lib Dems or the Green Party? Or you get the idea. You get the idea, and this is the thing I was going to say about Liz Truss, is that maybe, just maybe, the idea was to have her leave the country into such a state of anarchy that they could convince people that Labour could never fix it and they were going to fix it, but only going to fix it for them. They're not going to fix it for anyone else. So you pretend that everything is fine, everything is fine, everything is fine. So fuck it, why even give people the chance to vote anymore when we could just vote for ourselves for there to be the next leader? Why even bother having a general election at all? Why even bother having a democracy? Why even bother having a vote? Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, with that level of methodology, and it could be something that might become a reality if we're not careful, is that it will lead England straight into the arms of fascism. And it's not as if that sort of thing hasn't come on, because let me tell you something. When you hold an election where only point something of a percent of the entire population of one country is allowed to vote for a leader, democracy is completely thrown out the window, because it's not a democracy any longer. It might not be a dictatorship, but it's something else. Something maybe even more sinister. A single state, perhaps. Maybe that's what they'll call it. And I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen, but we can't let that happen. It might never happen. It might not happen in my lifetime, but something's got to be done. And to be completely honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, and I mean this with the absolute sincere bottom of my heart, full balls to the wall, going to just say this for now. If nothing else, that I want to personally show that there could be a better way out of all this. If nobody else is going to take accountability or responsibility or anything, or to showcase that there is a better way, then fuck it, I'll do it myself. And I only do this because there's got to be a better way than this. There's got to be a way to make life feel as if for some people it's worth living again. To not walk into a shop one day to see a bar of chocolate worth £1.5 and then the next day it's worth £1.15. Or for some people to think that it's completely unsafe to walk down the street for fear of being attacked by an XL dog or to be attacked with knives or to be robbed at gunpoint, for example. We are not going to live in fear, ladies and gentlemen. We should live openly, freely, lovingly, with open arms, with our friends and family around us. Live life in love, ladies and gentlemen, not in fear. Thank you.